Candice Elliott, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Santa Cruz. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the intersection of health and work. We talk about a lot of topics and issues on this podcast, and we often hit on issues of health and safety and holistic wellness. I think this will be a really interesting conversation because we're really going to try to mesh together this issue of broader societal health, the health of our workers, and really what this means for the workplace and how we can both treat our people with dignity and compassion while also helping everyone stay healthy so that we can have productive workplaces, ones that produce great things, so that we all thrive. As we get started, I wanted to share Candice's bio with everybody. Candice Elliott is a fractional CHRO and HR mentor for business and nonprofit leaders. She focuses on the intersection of public health, organizational, and community development, helping leaders foster cultures of healing where they and their teams can thrive. She has a master's in HR from Penn State, a senior professional in human resources certification, and has been practicing HR in the US and internationally for more than 10 years. She is also a mom of 2 little boys under 3 years old. Wonderful. Again, a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, I started down this path of understanding the intersection of health and work because I had a very intense experience of burnout that happened. And it was a combination of personal choices and things that were happening at work. And it culminated in me deciding to open my business, Fortress and Flourish, to help organizations have a better way to serve their employees while also being productive. And so just to add that there's a personal story behind that too.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think we probably all can, at least to some extent, relate to experiencing burnout, so in some cases more intensely than others. There's such a wide variety of types of issues that people deal with when we open up this topic of health and health at work. And burnout, of course, is one of those interesting, really important factors. So I appreciate that. I felt that too, at least to some extent. And it's a hard place to be, and it's a hard place to sometimes recover from, knowing you want to be there, you want to put your full effort in. It's something you used to be passionate about. You used to get excited to get up and go to work, and it's just not there anymore. It's a hard thing to turn around, or at least it really can be. Hopefully we can share some thoughts and ideas on how both workers and leaders within organizations can deal with these sorts of issues. All right, let's start with just kind of a general broad overview around the intersection of health and work. You explained why you're interested in it. Maybe paint a picture of the kind of the current landscape of the intersection of health and work.
Yeah. So currently in the United States, about 6 out of every 10 people have some kind of chronic health issue. It's called the American Health Disadvantage. Actually, it was written about in a Surgeon General's report in 2021. So that's a physical health challenge that more than 50% of our population is dealing with. 4 out of 10 of us have more than one chronic health condition. And then there's another report that was done by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with Hiring Our Heroes. And they looked into mental health and found that 80% of the workforce will have some kind of mental health crisis during their work life. And so that, paired with us spending most of our waking hours working, just kind of felt to me like, I really need to dig into this and learn more about how we can structure the workplace and what we can do in the workplace to help to address these societal issues that are happening right now.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to note. Like, these are broader societal patterns. Now, the workplace contributes to this, right? And like you said, we spend most of our waking hours at work, or at least, the majority of us do. And so these are really important issues, but let's also remember that there are broader societal macro levers kind of at play here that are contributing to this. And we talk about a lot of different types of disadvantages. I like the healthcare, the chronic condition disadvantage in the US, because that's an important factor to consider. We often think about ourselves, in the US, we tend to get a little bit haughty about like how progressive and forward we are and how we're the most productive and we're the most innovative. And, people like to talk about that in terms of the US economy and US business. But we have lots of issues. Like let's not sugarcoat it. And this health issue and the health disadvantage is a significant one. And if we want to be able to move forward into a productive future, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with this. And again, recognizing that it's not all on business, it's not all on organizational leaders. There are much broader factors contributing to this, but there is a lot we can do to design good work and healthy work, and to help our people to feel needed, wanted, valued, and supported in the work that they do. One of the issues I know it's especially got a lot of attention during the pandemic was really, mental health generally, stress, anxiety, but also loneliness. So many people were socially isolated and didn't have a chance to interact with people, were working remotely. I felt it. I felt a lot of stress and anxiety, in part because I had, my wife and I both work, and we had 6 children, all homeschooling, and trying to like navigate all that. That was really hard. But what we didn't feel, to the extent that I think a lot of people felt, was that loneliness, because we had each other, we had our children, we were kind of our own little bubble, but we still had our people, right? But there were so many people that were kind of stuck in isolation. They didn't have that. They didn't have those typical outlets for human connection. And that causes all sorts of challenges and problems. And we see that has continued, even, we're past the pandemic and into the endemic stage. We're really still seeing the challenges of a lot of people who feel that intense loneliness. They don't feel the connection. Tell us a little bit more about that, how that relates to the US health disadvantage, and how employers could start to address that.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a very interesting study that happened years ago, before the pandemic. It was called the Stable Scheduling Study, by Joan Williams, who's a professor at the University of California. And she went to all these Gap stores in San Francisco, and they instituted just some stable scheduling. So this was for hourly workers, but I think you can extrapolate it out for people who are exempt employees. And it is giving people control over their schedules and the ability to say when they are available to work and when they're not available to work. It also ensured that people would be able to switch shifts if they needed to. And so that had a lot of really important measurable health outcomes. So sleep becoming better by 6 to 8%, an increase of sales by 7%, and an increase of productivity of 5%. And so this is in retail, where the margin is very small. So those types of numbers are really, really significant. But I think too, when you get to the question of, loneliness, we sort of through the pandemic have had these big headlines about the workplace. It's like the Great Resignation is happening, quiet quitting is happening. And really, I think if you dig into the root cause of all of that, really has to do with connection and how work can be very transactional. And if a person is in a transactional work relationship, there's no incentive for them to stay, really. If it's simply just about how much a person can produce, and that's all it's about, then there's no reason for a person to stay at one company versus another. But if you have created an organization and a culture where people can actually have true and meaningful connections with one another, then people do tend to stick around, and they tend to be more involved in the work and more interested in their work and have the ability to go further in their careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm a university professor first and foremost. I'm a department chair. So I have, I don't know, depending on the semester, 18 or so full-time faculty that report to me, and another 20 to 25 part-time faculty that report to me, plus some student employees and some staff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And we work at a place with a lot of purpose. I think most people who are in higher education, especially today, given the challenges and the kind of the tough terrain in the landscape, societal landscape, and how higher ed is considered in a lot of parts of our society. People are there because they want to make an impact on students. They want to prepare the future workforce. There's a lot of really great meaning and purpose and intention behind it. And I've noticed with my people, even with that purpose piece, and even with the connection to students piece, I have some people that predominantly either want to, or for whatever reason, are primarily teaching more online stuff. They're not as present physically, versus those who are more present. And there is a difference in that sense of connection. I think the purpose piece is probably still there for them, but that sense of connection I believe, for many people, is really diminished. And so I'm all for the accessibility of remote and hybrid work. How that levels the playing field. It really is a great thing in a lot of ways from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint. It's a great thing that provides access and opportunity for people who otherwise may not, have as much opportunity. That's all wonderful. I do worry, though. I worry about, especially for younger career professionals, I worry about if they're getting the mentoring they need, if they're building the relationships that they need, and if they're feeling that sense of connection that's going to serve them not just now, but in the future. And with any hope, higher ed is a little bit different, but with any hope, we hire people and they stick around for a really long time. Like, our intention is to hire people who will then spend their career, or most of their career, with us. And so building those relationships, building that connection is so important. And again, my context is a little bit different in the higher ed setting than it is in a lot of other corporate spaces, but I see it. And if I see it where I'm at, it's got to be very prevalent in other places.
Yeah, I think it's challenging to create that cultural ecosystem with a remote workforce. I think that there are a lot of tools that are available to help with that. But then, making sure that everyone's able to engage with those tools and with each other in a meaningful way is important as well. I'm a part of a few different online communities that are hosted in different kind of group settings, like Slack or Circle or these different places. And I think there is a way of having building those kinds of relationships, but it has to be made a priority, and there has to be a way for it to happen.
Yeah, it has to be intentional. It's not just going to magically happen. Not that it magically happened before when everyone was together in person, but at least there was more of a chance of it happening kind of organically. You have to be much more direct and intentional about how you're designing those experiences in this kind of an environment. So again, loneliness is a challenge. I mean, that can lead to all sorts of other health outcomes, and it really can impact other business outcomes, and certainly can lead to higher turnover and lower levels of productivity and collaboration and all those sorts of things. So we want healthy workers. We want people who are mentally healthy. We want people who feel connected, who feel like they are energized and excited to show up to work with great people they care about, people that they are, feel excited to work with. All that, I guess, is the ideal that we're shooting for. And we recognize that that's not always the reality. And so, we want to try to put things in place to help build that capacity within our teams to the extent possible. There still continues to be a stigma around mental illness. I am happy to say, from my own experience, at least in interacting with organizations, I feel like that stigma has been lessened significantly over the last 10, 15 plus years. So that's great. That's a win. But the stigma still persists. It's still there. And it's a challenge. So a lot of people, especially in more cutthroat types of work environments, they don't feel like they can be transparent about those sorts of issues. They feel like they have to hide it, they have to pretend, they have to smile it away, and that can really be a problem, because anytime someone is kind of living a lie, or trying to put on a facade, it just takes up so much of your already depleted energy to be able to do that, which can lead to all sorts of other challenges. What do you think we can do as leaders to better support people through those difficult emotional situations that show up for them, whether it's at home, community, but either way, that they still bring it with them to work, or maybe it's happening at work. It's showing up at work with those things, and we can't separate people out from the different aspects of their life. How can we better support people who are dealing with those sorts of things, and not re-stigmatize them or shame them, or in any way, create a hostile environment where people don't feel psychologically safe, or able to share and seek support?
Yeah, I think it even goes a step further in that some people don't even recognize that they might be
Mm,
dealing with a mental health challenge
hmm.
because how much stigma there is against it still.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I work with my clients is just creating a little bit more space in everybody's schedule. Like, we want to make sure that everyone's productive, but it actually shows that there's better productivity if there is a little bit more wiggle room. So if your
Yeah.
staff are in meetings every single day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they're working on the weekends, um, they're only going to be able to do that for so long, right? And I think that as leaders, we have really important goals and we have missions that we need to accomplish. And I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, and there is this kind of like savior sort of
Yeah.
mentality of like, I need to work harder because I'm doing this work that's so meaningful in the world. And so I think as a leader, just being able to downshift. I think we're really good as a society at upshifting, like shifting
Hmm.
upward, going
Hmm.
faster, doing more, but creating spaces where people can downshift, where they can settle a little bit, and creating space where people can come to you with difficult things that are going on and know and be able to trust you that you're going to support them, and that you're not going to create a bigger problem out of whatever it is, that they're not going to. I think a lot of people don't come forward with issues because they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs if they talk
Yeah.
about it. So
Yeah.
just communicating that people are safe, and
Yeah.
that they can bring
Or
you
not
in.
even losing a job, but that they're just going to be seen as damaged, and therefore they're not going to get the new assignments, or they're not going to get the opportunity for a promotion or whatever, right? There's like so many ways that someone could subtly be disadvantaged at work because they come forward with something that they're dealing with. And it may be with good intention. Even like, I could totally see a scenario where someone comes forward to their boss, they feel safe enough to share, and then the boss, out of a sense of probably genuine compassion and desire to help this person, they try to lighten their load a little bit or whatever, while that's something that needs to be negotiated with the person, I guess, is what I'm
Yeah.
suggesting, because good intentions can also negatively impact that person. And now, they may feel like, oh, I just shared this with my boss, and now I had a big client taken away, or there's this big promotion that I wanted to be up for, and now I'm not being considered for it, or whatever the case may be. Let's make sure we have those dialogues with our people, so we can work out something that works for everyone, where people don't feel punished, or in some way penalized for sharing something that's genuine to themselves. And like you mentioned, 6 in 10 Americans are dealing with chronic health issues. That means most of us are dealing with chronic health issues. And so just because someone comes forward and is willing to share and is brave to share, that shouldn't disadvantage them, because the reality is, you can pretty much assume that everyone's dealing with stuff, right? Everyone's dealing with physical stuff or mental stuff. And if we just start, I think, from that place of assumption, then we don't have to, disadvantage people, or assume they can't handle it, or whatever, just because they've shared something.
Yeah, your point is a really good one. It's to be in a collaborative conversation with someone and to not assume that they'll want a particular thing. I think
Mm,
it's good to just ask, how can I help? What is it that I can do? Maybe one person will need to take a leave of absence, whereas another person will want to just shift their
yeah.
responsibility slightly. And then another person may want to, take on more. And so different people respond differently to stress and to mental health challenges, and the solution isn't the same for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And also consider, like when we have someone who goes on maternity or paternity leave, that I think most people nowadays recognize that shouldn't negatively impact someone in their career. It still can, unfortunately, but I think more and more people are recognizing that. Okay, so if we can accept that and we can say, yeah, someone may need to even be gone for 3 months, but we're going to welcome them back. Their job will be there for them. We're going to reintegrate them in meaningful ways. If we're willing to do that work and able to do that work for someone who, say, takes maternity or paternity leave, why can't we do that for people who have other chronic health issues, or they have a mental health challenge, or a substance abuse issue that they need to address, or whatever, right? I think if we can just be a little bit more uh, thoughtful in how we approach coverage of the roles and tasks that need to be performed within our organization, within our teams, then we can be more accommodating to people. We can provide the support necessary in a collaborative way, in a way that meets them where they're at, and with where what they need, I guess, from us to be able to move forward. Also, to your point you made a few minutes ago, it's important to recognize, because of the stigma, that some people just either they don't feel safe to come forward, but also sometimes they just don't see it in themselves, or they see it, they buy into the stigma and they see it as a sign of weakness, so they don't want to admit it to themselves that it's something that they're dealing with. So sometimes as a leader, I think it's our job to look out for the warning signs of burnout, of stress and anxiety, of depression, of some of those sorts of things, and to have mentoring conversations and coaching conversations, and be vulnerable enough, with our own story, that we can, share in appropriate ways, the things that we do and what we're dealing with in a way that then creates a permission structure for other people to then do the same, recognizing that, oh, my boss, has had these issues. They're still doing fine. They've been supported in these ways. I can too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to go back to what you were saying about maternity and paternity leave, that it touches on something that is related to this, but we haven't really explicitly mentioned it yet, but compensation and the way that people are compensated. So
Yeah.
mothers in the US make 3/4 of what everybody else makes, and mothers of color make about half of what everyone else makes. And so um, there is a piece of this that is looking at what the compensation system is that you're dealing with and how that is potential unintentionally
Yeah.
disadvantaging certain populations. When I go in and do a compensation analysis, it's wild the amount of times that there are unintentional discriminatory pay systems that are happening. It has happened in almost every system that I've looked at, and so it's very prevalent. But we never think that it's happening in our place. We always think that we're doing everything right, especially with regard to compensation.
Well, yeah, and part of that is coming back to this idea that, you know, is it intentional or not? Does our executive team wake up in the morning, thinking, ha ha ha, how am I going to disproportionately negatively impact certain subgroups of our workforce today? And I don't think
Yeah,
most,
definitely not. I don't
yeah,
think
I don't
so.
think most people would ever even that thought would never cross their mind, right? I think most people are well intentioned. They want to do right by other people. What you're describing is a systematic issue, right? And those are the harder ones to unpack and to recognize. And the number of times that I've talked to leaders where I've seen a systematic challenge around, discrimination or disadvantage or inequity of some sort, and I'll bring it up, and they'll, the first response is, well, I'm not sexist.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, great. I'm not saying you're sexist, or I'm not saying you're a bigot or that you're a racist. but I'm saying let's look at the data. Let's look at the system that's creating these types of inequities. It's not attacking you as a leader. It's not attacking any. It's just like, let's be aware of what's happening, and then we can adjust the levers, right? We can change the policies, practices, procedures in such a way that it's more equitable for everyone. And that's hard work. I mean, that's hard for people to accept because, most people, again, they have good intentions. They're not trying to hurt anybody, but they're going to have to at least accept institutionally some level of accountability for what's happening to be able to make a course correction. And that's a really hard thing for people.
And I think it gets into this question of how much does a person deserve for the work that they're doing? Like, what is the worth of this person? And it's also tied into what is the worth of the work that they're doing for the organization. So how much value are they contributing? And if someone is gone for 3 months and then comes back for whatever reason, that just in itself means that they may have missed a raise that happened for the rest of the team, or
Right.
they weren't contributing for that amount of time, and so they get put down on a little bit of a lower level. But yeah, there are these bigger questions about worth and value and how we compensate people to look into.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Candice, this has been a great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go, but before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, so you can connect with me through my website, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And just finally, I wanted to say that if you feel like you are pushing yourself towards burnout or your team towards burnout, if you have no clue how to even begin to tackle this, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who are trying to work on this. And if there's any way that I can help, I would love to.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Candice can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.